Welcome to this webinar. Welcome to the next 45 minutes where we will be talking about the Belbin Team Reports and how to use them when you're forming a brand new team. My name's Jo Keeler and I'm here at Belbin HQ, and we'll be looking in detail at when you have the luxury, I don't know many people have the luxury of actually creating a team from scratch. How do you put the best team together? How do you know which team to put together? What do you look for? What are the attributes? How can you use Belbin to help your team be as effective as it possibly can be? What do you need to look out for? As I said, we're going to be spending probably about half an hour just going through this, and then we're going to be asking and answering your questions at the end. But if you do have any questions in the meantime, please do put that on the chat. Okay. I'm just going to start sharing my screen, and I'm going to go here and I'm going to go here. So this is what we're going to be looking at: how to use Belbin Team Role reports to form a team, how to put a new team together. Now, one could say it's quite simple, isn't it? You just choose the people you've got around you and say, right, we're working as a team. But wouldn't it be lovely just to take a deep breath beforehand to actually plan what is it that you need for your team to be the most successful it possibly can be? So looking really, what we need to start with right at the very, very beginning is we need to ask ourselves a question, and we need to make sure that we know why we're putting the team together. And I know that sounds really obvious. I know it really does, but the team needs a really clear objective. It needs a really clear purpose. So make sure you have clarity on this. And it's not just the purpose of the team. You need clarity on things like timings, expectations, which stakeholders are going to be involved, spending time, forget the people to start with, but really spend time here working out what is it that the team is there to achieve, and all of the other elements as well, because the longer you spend here, the more successful your team will be. The amount of times we've worked with teams and actually they're really not sure about their objectives, or their objectives keep changing. And if you're doing this, it is difficult to make the most out of every individual contribution. So before you even start looking at Belbin or your reports or the people, check that you have a clear purpose, a clear objective. But once you've done that, you then need to think, okay, so we know what we're here to achieve. We need to find out the people that need to be in the team to help me achieve this. Well, actually, no, there's still work to be done before you really look at the people involved. What we recommend, you'll recognise this if you are accredited, is you need to really start looking at the work that needs to be done. Break down your project, break down what that team's objective is, and work out which behaviours are going to be needed, which behavioural contributions are needed for each individual element. So we'll go through this, and I'd like everybody to think as we go through, is right at the very beginning, when you are identifying those goals, those objectives, which behaviours are the ones that are needed most? And it says here, Meredith wrote this beautifully, that some projects just fail because the wrong targets are set, the wrong goals are set. The best behaviours to help you identify the correct goals are that of shaper and coordinator. So once those goals have been identified, what do you need next? Well, what you really need are some ideas. How are you going to get to the objectives? Where are the ideas coming from? Well, of course, you want ideas which are unique ideas, ideas which are creative, come from free thinking. But you also want ideas that are coming from outside of the organisation. Perhaps other teams have done something similar, other organisations have done something similar. What did they do? So you're looking for behaviours that are greater ideas, either unique, original ideas, or ideas from elsewhere. So break it down. What behaviours are you going to need if you're putting this new team together? What behaviours are you going to need right at the very beginning when you're looking for ideas? So once you've got all of those ideas, what else do you need? Well, next you kind of need those behaviours that are going to make sure the best ideas are chosen and the best ideas go forward. And it's not just a case of working out the pros and cons of each. It's also checking that you have somebody with enough professional knowledge in that area to ensure that these plans are doable, they're realistic. So which behaviours are you needing there? Well, you're needing the behaviours of the monitor evaluator and the specialist. And this is before you've even gone forward. So you've identified exactly what it is that you need. You've had the ideas and you've worked out which one of those is going to go forward. Well, what else do you need? How else could you break down your project? Well, you could also break it down by thinking, what about contacts? I pressed my button too soon, but never mind. What are the contacts that we need, both internally and externally, to make this happen? Who do we need to know? Who is in our little black book? So the resource investigator behaviour, obviously ideal because they know everybody. And the team worker really knows everybody internally. Both these team roles, both these behaviours are also very useful at selling. If you're doing a change project, for example, if you need to get other people, other stakeholders on board, if you want to have somebody with lots of enthusiasm for your particular project, for the reasons, you know, the objective of your team, the resource investigator and team worker can really help sell it for you as well, which is, excuse me, fantastic. So we've got the goals, we've got the ideas, we've got the plans, we've got the contacts. What else are you going to need? Well, you're going to need those behaviours that are fabulous at organisation. And in this case, we've got the organisation of the people and also the organisation of the work that needs to be done. So we're looking here at both the implementer and the coordinator behaviours. So the implementer is the one with the very practical, they're loyal, they're rolling up their sleeves, and they are organising the work that needs to be done. And the coordinator, who is wonderful at identifying talent, is there organising and delegating the right work to the right people. So that everything's being done, the organisation is being done, then you have the follow through. And here you really do need to start looking at those standards. You need to make sure you're not making any mistakes. And again, with the implementer, with the process right till the very end. So before you've even thought about the people, think about what the team is there to achieve. Think about the project that you are working on and break it down in terms of which behaviours are required. There's another slide here that puts it in a slightly different way. And this is from an organisation that we worked with. And this is the way that every single one of their projects works. They start with the ideas, they have the evaluation stage, the implementation stage, and then they're complete. And they use their knowledge of Belbin to be able to work out where they needed each of these behaviours. So as we just said, right at the ideas stage, they needed the plant resource investigator. They wanted the monitor evaluator at the evaluation stage, surprise, surprise. At the implementation stage, they wanted the implementer and the completer finisher to get it over the line. What they said what they also needed was the coordinator to coordinate the project, to make sure the right people were being used at the right times, or the right behaviours at the right time. They involved the shaper behaviour as and when the project looked like it was going a little bit off track, sort of slowing down a little bit, and they needed that injection of energy. They used the team worker behaviour when they needed the team to gel a little bit more, when there was friction, when there were problems. And they used the specialist as and when that level of professionalism, that knowledge of, in that sort of deep dive of that particular subject area. So it's really important to look at what you need first. And this may be, you know, it won't vary too much, I don't think, but each of you will have a unique way of setting out your projects. Each of you will have a way in which you break up the work, the way that you work. But before you start thinking about the people there, think about what are the behaviours that are needed, which behaviours are needed at each point. I just put this slide in here actually, because I think Meredith makes the point beautifully. And that sometimes we feel that everybody should be included in everything. Everybody should be around at all times, where in fact, not everybody is required at all times at all. In fact, if you look back at that last slide, they found the reason the organisation worked with us is because their projects just never got over the end point. And it was because they were always involving those plants and resource investigators right throughout. So they would start implementing a plan, and then someone would go, well, actually, I've got a better idea. Let's do it this way. And so they'd go in this constant loop. But once they realised that those behaviours could be asked to leave, go and work on a different project, whatever, and the project was allowed to continue, it was far more productive. Make sure that people know when they're going to be needed. Another top tip before we go on to the reports is make sure you don't involve too many people. For those of you who've been on a few of these webinars will know that we really do talk about the size of teams. It's so important that you keep that size small, and it needs to be small to ensure that everybody has a contribution, so everybody knows what it is that they're doing. It's always really easy just to add more people, but by adding more people, you're not necessarily making the team more effective. So we're looking here at the differences between a group and a team. So make sure that when you are doing it, you keep in mind the numbers. Are you looking for group work where everybody is, you're dictating more to a group, whereas a team is more interactive? Really make sure that you're not just adding people. Okay, so some top tips there. First of all, start off with the work that needs to be done. Allocate that work to team role behaviours. Which behaviours do you need? Don't go overboard, don't involve too many people. And remember that you're not wanting everybody to be involved at the same time. And then that key one is having that clarity about the objectives right at the very off. So how can we use the Belbin team reports to help you with this? Where are the key elements? So the team reports can be generated only after everybody has completed the Belbin self-perception inventory and ideally have obtained observers. Those observers are the reality check. Those observers are really checking and saying, yes, we believe you also have those, you have those behavioural contributions, or actually we think that your behavioural contributions, your strengths lie elsewhere. So it's really important to have those observer assessments as well. So once you know the pool of people that you are working with, once you know how many people are available, who is available, and that's when knowing timelines right at the very beginning is incredibly useful. You can start seeing here who's in the pool and looking at their team role. So this is just a very simple page where it looks at everybody. It looks at their self-perception from 1 to 9. It looks at their combined observers, 1 to 9, with 1 being the top and 9 being the bottom. And then it has this wonderful complicated algorithm in the background, and it comes up with an overall score. So make sure you know who you've got. And then you need to work out actually who is going to be able to make the contribution. So this is where you could link it with the work that you've already sorted out earlier. So this page really is showing you the potential contribution of everybody that you have got who may be able to join you. And what you can see here is, do you have lots of people who have got the same behaviours? And are there some behaviours where actually you don't have anybody? So in this case, nobody is really showing a potential contribution for the role of coordinator or for completed finisher. There isn't anyone there. But there are 3 people who are able to contribute as a resource investigator. So this may start you thinking, okay, so we've got most roles covered here, but there may be a couple which we don't have. This is also illustrated on the next page. Now this page is just looking at those top 2 team roles, the top 2 team roles from everybody, looking at the overall profile. And again, this gives you an overview, this gives you an idea of the distribution of those team role behaviours that within the team, where the gaps are. So as you can see here, this is showing something slightly different, because we also now have a gap for specialists, because although somebody may have it over 65th percentile, it's not one of their top 2 team roles. And it's from here as well that you can start getting your crystal ball out, because you can start thinking, what is the interaction between them as well? If we have a lot of social roles, what's going to happen? If we just choose everybody with action roles, what's going to happen? So we have lots of things there to look at. I love this page. But we're going to go back to this in a bit more detail later. Now, at Belbin, what we say, it's all well and good people saying, well, you know, my top team roles are these. What we're really looking for are people who are a strong example of the type. And these are the ones that really show those team roles in abundance. They show those strengths and they're being seen by others as well. So you're looking at people here in the 85th percentile or higher for that particular team role. There are other elements as well, but that's the most obvious one. So these are the people who are really going to make an impact. Now, this is showing a slightly different picture, isn't it? It's showing, oh, okay, this is interesting. So if I just look to people who are really strong for that team role, we've got a few more gaps, haven't we? That monitor evaluator, there's a gap. And actually, we only have 1 or 2 people for the others. What we've added with these new team reports is you can now produce this as well as a team circle. So it's saying, okay, so just looking at those which are showing strong examples, what have we got here to choose from? Who have we got that could potentially form that team? Now, if you have gaps, that's a good question. If you have gaps, what do you do? So you have a couple of options. The first one is there somebody who you could, perhaps has got that team role, you know, step further down their profile, but you could use this as development. Perhaps they've never had the opportunity to play that role. Perhaps you want to use this as an idea of seeing if they are suitable for that role. Perhaps there's some development to come in, some coaching, so because they know what role that they're going to play. So you can either look from within to see if there is possibilities there, there's potential there, or is this a point where you think, well, actually, I only need, let's say there wasn't anything under the plant, I only need that creative sort of original thought right at the very beginning. Perhaps I can find that outside of this particular group of people that potentially could join my team. Perhaps because it's only for a limited time, I could ask so-and-so if they're free. So it's either saying, how can we use it to develop, or who else can we find to bring in? The next page here is then giving you an idea of what are the average for that particular group of people. And when you're looking for a team, really what you're looking for to get the highest performing team possible is there to be a dark green bar at 80 or above. So a strong example for each of those particular team roles. So when you've got everybody together and you're looking at them and thinking, who can we choose here? It really does think, okay, well, we really do need that completed finisher, because Ali Blue is the highest, is the person with the highest score for completed finisher. But it's also, well, she's also the highest for team worker as well. And implementer. Oh, do we want that to be the case? Do we need somebody else to join the team to take that role, because Ali Blue has already got other team roles that they can play really well? I'm just going to stop sharing a second. She says confidently. There we go. Perfect. Because what you can do is start playing around with this before you actually use the report. So I just really like to share you a new feature we have on the new platform. Right, share. So this is the Belbin platform. We're now on the 8th version of it. And up here, I've just pulled together what we call our sample group. We've got 12 people in it. So you may have 12 people that potentially could join this project. Okay, let's think of it in that way. You need to know a little bit about each person, and we can find out a little bit about Ali Blue here by just clicking here, and we can see, okay, they've got their observers, brilliant, and these are their percentile scores for each of those team roles. Brilliant, we've got that information. And then what we can also do is, well, perhaps you'd like to see all of them as a team. Let's preview this. Let's see what we have. And if we had all of those 12 individuals, this has given me a rough idea for the averages. What is the average for that team? But you see, I know that Joe's not available. I know that Rob's on another project, and I know that Dave's going on paternity leave. So that's limiting my choice somewhat. But as you can see, as you can click in and out, it gives you a different idea of the impact that that person was having on the overall of the team. And you can start clicking and working out who is it who's bringing that completer finisher behavior, for example. Who do I need? And only when you're happy and when you started playing around with it, let's get Jan out, let's get Jean-Paul out, let's get Vicky out. We don't need Vicky. What difference that actually makes. And when you're happy, you can press that button and your team report is generated. Now, obviously, if you have the full interplay system or if you have one of our annual licenses, you can press that as many times as you like without being charged. But if you're on a bureau service, you are charged each time you then generate a team report. But it allows you to play around with it first, to get a feel for it first, before you start generating those reports. And again, you have that added information there as well. Okay, let's stop sharing. Get very excited when I share that page because I think that's going to be really, really useful for when you are putting teams together. Okay, let's go back now to the Belbin reports. Where are we? Here we are. So ideally what you're looking for, like I said before, is there's somebody for each team role who's in the 80th percentile or higher, and that not one person is covering more than, say, 2 of those particular team roles, because what happens if suddenly they're off with COVID or whatever it is that makes you rather short-staffed at the moment. So really do look at that. Within the team report, you also have 2 additional pages. You have one that's looking at the averages. It gives you an idea of the culture of the team. But you may not need this at this point because you're still putting your team together. Maybe this is something to look at more once you've decided who should be on your team. And again, you have all of those words combined that, again, is really useful when the team perhaps is already there. And perhaps it's not as useful right now. Okay, so you've made sure that you have an objective. You've checked that your team isn't too big. You know everything about your objectives, your timings, etc. You've broken down the work that needs to be done. You've broken it down into bits and you've allocated the right team roles to that. You can then work out who the best people are to fit to each of those team roles by looking at the team report, looking and bearing in mind how strong they are in a particular team role, whether or not you need to develop people to come up, whether or not you need to bring people in. Maybe your pool isn't big enough, or maybe you have so many people, it's really difficult to work out who to have. So then you need a sense check, don't you? So you've done all this, and you've got your ideas there. Let's just check this again. Have we got everybody we need? Do we have people with good ideas? Have we got someone who can choose which idea would work best? Who's going to be the one to allocate the roles? Who's orchestrating the team effort? Who's the practical one? Who's going to do the work? Have we got people who are really going to check our standards? Who are the ones who are going to go outside of the group, perhaps liaise with stakeholders? Who is the one who's going to stop, just stop complacency, really. Do we have someone who's going to stop the arguments and help really improve the atmosphere of the team? And do we have someone who is knowledgeable in a certain area? Do we have that professional knowledge? So really just, again, sense checking. Do you have everybody that you need right now? Do you have all of those behaviours that are required? I'm putting this slide up because sometimes it's really political, isn't it, putting together a team? Sometimes it's really hard because there are expectations of who you should include and perhaps who you shouldn't have in there. By using Belbin, it does give you that language of saying, look, it's not that I don't want you in the team, but what I'm really looking for at the moment is a strong plant resource investigator who is going to be ideally right at the very beginning of what we're doing to really lend ideas. It's not that I don't want you, managing director, whomever, but right now I'm looking at just those behavioural contributions. It just gives you a language to help manage any situations that may arise when you are putting that team together. I will just say at this point that spending time putting the right team together is really important, and it will really it will be so incredibly useful as you go through. But just putting the right team together, using Belbin to make sure that all of those behavioural contributions are there as and when, that doesn't mean that the team's going to succeed. What we found, and what study after study has found as well, that the crucial element is then, once you have chosen the people to be part of the team, is that they understand that. They understand the strengths that they have. They understand why you're asking them and which strengths you want them to bring to the team. And also that they understand the strengths and weaknesses of everybody else as well, to ensure that people understand which contributions to make, when not to make them, who should be on the stage at each time, because this shouldn't be any new team, any new project. It shouldn't really be just up to one person to decide that. If you're looking really at the team being able to coach themselves as well, everybody needs to be able to take some sort of responsibility to ensure that everybody is being used at the right times. So spend time, once you've put your team together, spend time with that team to ensure that they understand the process that you went through and what is required of them. Use this. It's behind me. I'll show it to you in a minute because you can't see it at the moment. Use this. Get everybody to understand where they fit on the team circle, and use it to predict as well things like conflict that may happen. Look at the opposites. For those of you who are accredited, for example, the opposite team role behaviour to a resource investigator is the completer finisher. One's always starting things, one's trying to finish them, and they can really, really, really drive each other mad. But once they realise that that other person hasn't been put on the planet to actually infuriate the heck out of them, and actually working together, they've got a really, really productive relationship. That's where the magic happens. So right at the very beginning, make sure people understand not just their own contributions, the contributions of others, and where those potential issues may arise. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. All of this, like I said, is on a download, which we will send to you. Putting together a team is a luxury. We very rarely have the opportunity. We're normally said, this is what you've got, and this is what you want to achieve, off you go. And obviously the team reports can be used for that as well, but with a definitive amount of people. So I really hope that you've found this useful. I hope you've found it, but really, I love this. This is where the magic happens. This is where really you need to get people to start talking to one another after the team's been put together to find out what they're doing. So get people writing on flip charts and sharing their Belbin team role behaviours. Okay. How's the chat been, Vicky? Has it been quite busy? It'd be wonderful to see if there's been any questions perhaps, or any questions now that you would like to share with us, that you would like to discuss. Hello there.
Hi. Yeah, there's been lots going on in the chat actually. We've been talking about, I suppose the best way of putting it is sort of buy-in for managers. Obviously, you've got to have that sort of level of buy-in, and I think you kind of touched on the political side in terms of who to include, who to exclude. But I think there's also kind of issues around trust and sort of, I guess, finding people who want to be in that team and having that sort of positivity to start with. So I suppose there's a piece around the kind of the trust and the psychological safety when you're forming a team. You talked a little bit about expectations. But I think Stephen was sort of saying, you know, this sort of makes sense, but where you've got issues that people have been avoiding for a long time, he's saying these aren't projects that people are necessarily queuing up to be involved with.
You know, it's very true, isn't it? Sometimes you know that certain projects are like the kiss of death, aren't they? You feel, I don't want to be there, I don't want to be involved. There's history and everything. I would say that in our experience, it is easier to do this when there is already a level of understanding of team roles. I was saying right at the very beginning with the company that we worked with, we came up with that project line. The reason that worked really well is because they'd Belbinned everybody and made sure that everybody was really understanding of why they were doing that as an organisation. and therefore they suddenly understood why they were being involved in certain projects, and they had real clarity. I think the other thing I would say, I think you'd agree, Vicky, is it's just spending time up front. And it's making sure that you have so much clarity with the objectives, the timelines, how you're being measured, how the performance is going to be measured, who's managing who, all of those questions right at the very front, and having them really clearly communicated with everybody is crucial.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's that, and there's also, as you kind of touched on, the ability to sort of use the team role language to step outside the hierarchy and be able to say, you know, well, actually, we don't need the shaper right now. We're doing the monitor evaluator, and I think that sort of helps people to think, you know, this doesn't have to go the way that all other projects go, with this person sort of doing this, and having that sort of understanding there, as you say, and even being able to say, you know, to talk about who we don't want in the room at certain times. You sort of went through the different project stages. That can be quite a difficult conversation to have. But I think if you're saying, you know, we're at the ideas phase, we don't want to sort of do that analysis work yet, it sort of takes the sting out of it, I think, doesn't it?
I think it does. I also think it does help a little with the psychological safety element as well, because I'm trying to think how to best put this, but sometimes if you're in that very beginning stages of a project, when you are looking at those ideas, and perhaps you have client resource investigator at the bottom of your profile, perhaps you are the one who's the high implementer that's always looking for the practical element, who's always looking, well, this is fine, but how can we turn all of this into work, into action? And every time you contribute that, it's being knocked down, because that's not what's being required. And unless you have that sort of Belbin Team Role language, you wouldn't understand why you're constantly being knocked down. People are going, oh, not again, not that again. And so you're less likely to want to contribute. Whereas if everybody understood that actually we only wanted those ideas and implementers for later, you're like, oh, okay, that's fine. Perhaps I know that my contribution is going to be really needed elsewhere. And it really helps with making sure that it's the appropriate person at the appropriate time.
Yes, yeah.
At the appropriate time, absolutely.
Yeah, or on the other end of the scale, if you're sort of thinking, well, I'm always the one who's left doing the bulk of the work, you know, then you think, okay, well, I know where that contribution is going to be, and I know, yeah, where I can call on other people. I think that's really good. We've also been talking a little bit about the observer assessment, and I've said a little bit about how we ensure that we avoid bias, and that the algorithms try to take care of that. And a little bit, you kind of touched on the strong examples. Apologies, I was typing at the time, so I don't know if you covered exactly what we mean by strong examples, but just to sort of put it in context, we were also talking about how people who are sort of newer to the workplace might not be so defined in terms of their strengths, and how we sort of deal with that in a team.
I think that's really important, because everybody is at a different stage of their working life, and Belbin's measuring behaviour, isn't it? It's measuring what we do, and sometimes we don't know what we do yet, because we haven't been in that situation. Strong examples, we are looking at somebody who is at the 80th percentile or higher for a particular team, or their observers agreeing with themselves. They're showing mostly the positive attributes, not too many of those list Bs are coming in. There's lots of elements there. If somebody isn't too sure yet, this is where it's really a development piece. And I think this is within, if you've got that safety within the team, if people are really wanting the team to succeed, it can be right. We're not sure yet whether or not you are or have the potential to be a strong, really strong example of that particular team role. But as a team, we're going to take responsibility for coaching you and helping you make the best possible contribution that you can. And it could be that afterwards, there's a real resonance going, do you know, I really felt that I contributed there, and I'd like to learn more. I'd like to develop more so that I can play that role again. Or it could be, do you know, I didn't feel that I was giving the best I possibly could. It didn't feel as much of a natural fit for me. I didn't feel that I did make the impact I wanted. Perhaps there are other behaviours, other roles in which I can try next time round. Remember, these team roles aren't static. And most of the time when people get their Belbin Team Role profile, this is just a snapshot in time. These are things to be developed we're not the finished article. We never are the finished article. So it's using the feedback and really trying to develop so that you can make the best possible contribution to that particular team, which is there at the time, that you possibly can. And I think that not only is that the responsibility of the manager, but it's also the responsibility of everybody else within the team. And that's why you need so much buy-in right at the very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other side of that is when you do have that sort of team role strain, and someone playing out of role a little bit, I think sometimes just to know that it is for the duration of that project or for that stage of the project.
It's not forever.
Helps.
It's not forever. And absolutely. And also it's giving support to that person if there's somebody is playing a role which is really never going to be a particular strength, but the team needs it. It's putting your hand up saying, I'm playing this for the team. Please, can you lend me your support? Please, can you help as and when is needed? So that they don't feel so isolated. You don't want everybody else playing to the strengths and there's somebody who's really not, and you know they don't feel that they're making as much of a contribution. So it's the support from within, that team coaching bit actually, that's really important here.
Yeah, I think the other thing is we've had lots of lovely words about the new reports. People just asking about the availability and languages, and I've said that our distributors are working away on the translations, but everything's still fairly new.
Everything is so new, and I think like with most of other companies as well, we've had problems with staffing, etc. So we're coming out very slowly, but if you do want the new reports, they are available to you. So please just do contact us for those. Okay. Any last questions there, Vicky?
Oh yes, we have a couple more in Q&A, which I missed. Is there any key cultural characteristic playing a key role for successful implementation of Belbin Team Roles?
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Culture is always an interesting topic because you've got culture when it comes to different countries, or you've got culture actually within organisations themselves, and between organisations themselves. I mean, culture is a very big subject. I'd love to answer that question now, but what I'm going to do instead, if we can check to see on that, we've got a couple of webinars that we ran last year all about culture, which I think will be really, really useful for you. Otherwise, this is just going to go on because I could talk about it for hours and days, and that's so can Vicky. So
it is its own big topic, isn't it? We have another one, which is: have you ever combined Belbin with implementation strategies, such as the Walt Disney strategy, to protect the ideas development while addressing practical aspects of implementation?
Well, that's an interesting one. I'm going to say no. No. It's always best to be honest, isn't it? But I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who use Belbin who have used that. I know that there's a lot of project teams that use Belbin as part of other frameworks as well. So if anybody has, please let us know, and then we can share that with everybody. It'd be really interesting to hear, actually. Okay, we very rarely get the luxury to actually put a brand new team together, very rarely. But when we do, why not spend time to really work out who you need to get involved? Spend time right at the very beginning on those objectives. Make sure that you have so much clarity before you even start. Break down what's actually required in terms of chunks of work that needs to be done. Look at the behaviours that you'll be looking for, and then start looking at the pool of available people. And at this point, you can use your Belbin team reports to try and make sure that you're allocating the right people to the right parts of the team, to the right parts of the project, and help develop those as well, perhaps, who would like to make a strong contribution. And most importantly, once you have chosen your team, that's not the end of it. The end of it is the end of the project. What you do need to do is start getting everybody to communicate and sharing their strengths, their weaknesses, and where they're going to be contributing to the team. Phew, it's quite hard work, isn't it? All these things sound great on paper, but my goodness, this is why teamwork is so powerful, because when it's done correctly, it is just a thing to behold, but my goodness, you have to work at it. Hopefully what Belbin does is gives you the language, the reports, the knowledge to, well, just help you along the way. So thank you very much indeed for joining us. 45 minutes is up, it's never that long. You will be receiving a recording and a copy of the guide. So thank you so much indeed for joining us, and see you again soon.
Thank you.